class, I have compiled several artists for you to take a look at and just to know about collectively as a group in response to all of your presentations that you did on Monday for class. I noticed one of the big draws in our group, one big common thread, is a lot of you seem to be really drawn into the idea of portraiture, using the body in several interesting different ways. Some of you were interested in using text, and some of you were interested in doing projects that involved being outside of the studio. So, what I've done was I collected several artists that I thought were handy to know. Most of them are contemporary artists, and others are some that you may have seen in an art history class, but I wanted to try and make sure that a lot of these artists that I referenced were working within the last 20, 30 years. So everyone is pretty contemporary for the most part. One of the first artists I wanted to talk about with everyone was Kehinde Wiley. He was known for doing the portraits of Barack Obama. He also does a lot of imagery where he's elevating black figures in more of a contemporary context, but then also pairing it with these really unique wallpapers and just really trying to elevate the figure using the poses, as well as referencing historical art history pieces, such as the one on the left here. So this piece on the left was famously a piece where Napoleon was riding his horse, and it's a very famous painting. You often see it in the Met, and then he did his own take on it. And then he also, like I mentioned before, was known for the Obama portrait. Another artist using portraiture, but more in a dark sense, is Francis Bacon. He'll take certain figures that he does not agree with or he was criticizing and putting them into contexts like Slaughterhouse, or in the case of the piece on the left, that's Pope Innocent in an electric chair. This artist is actually a friend of mine who I did an art residency with at Vermont Studio Center. And I thought this would be good to show because he is really a profound artist in drawing, but then I think it's really interesting the way he approaches doing two-dimensional works because he's ripping out a lot of surfaces and then doing smaller drawings in between. There's also an interest with horror with some people in this class, so I thought that because he was using horror references, that would be really interesting to look at visually, as well as he's also using uh, influences by drag. The portrait on the far right is actually a self portrait where he has a witch nose and he's slowly morphing into witch drag. I apologize for these photos being a little bit small, but I thought this artist was also really interesting the way she's kind of using portraiture and kind of like an escapist type mentality to create her works. This is Kelly Cinnapon Mary, and she creates these really interesting portraits of uh, people blending into the backgrounds while having these really interesting focal points, like the one where she's holding the chicken and having this kind of scene happening before her. So I think the way she's approaching the layering in her work is really interesting. This is Roberto Lugo, and I actually went to grad school with him, and he teaches at Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia. And he does a lot of portraiture on his ceramics, since I know we had a couple people that were really interested in ceramics in this class, and then and as well as the interest in portraiture and figure. I thought these would really be some great examples to show of how this artist approaches surface texture, and he also is working in a similar vein to Kehinde Wiley, where he's elevating certain figures by addressing lots of ornamentation and then picking specific icons to raise up or elevate. I thought a lot of you would enjoy the artist Murakami. Murakami does a lot of these like really bright, kind of like poppy type pieces that are really kind of graphic looking. He's an artist based out of Japan. Then, along the lines of his work, there's another artist who's, they would be kind of considered outsider type artists, but because they weren't necessarily formally trained by an art institution. So you have people like Cause, who's basically making a lot of work with this like cartoony aesthetic, but then also has kind of some dark undertones. A lot of you seem to be really interested in, kind of this aesthetic or this type of mood or vein with your artwork. And then I have some cool examples as far as like photography. This is an artist named Alice Teeple who does a lot of work where she's kind of blending various layers of photographs that she takes using various filters. So she does a lot with like digital photography, and she does some stuff with darkroom. I know we have one person that was particularly interested in like landscapes and doing stuff out on sites. So this artist I thought was really cool to know about. I mean, he's a painter and his name is Rackstraw Downs, and he does a lot of work with like really vast landscapes and kind of edits them and leaves the canvas kind of raw in some spots. Like this canvas was made out of wood, so you could see some of the rawness emerging through the picture. So I thought that was a really interesting approach to image. Another photographer doing some really interesting things. This is an Irish photographer named Richard Moss, and he uses a special film that's like an infrared film. So all of these images are coming from Nigeria. So normally everything would be really bright and green, but because he's using this infrared film, it kind of has this like fantastical feeling to it. But the infrared film was meant to have like a military purpose where you were able to hide anyone, or you were able to catch anyone that may have been hiding with that film. So, as you can see on the photo on the right, the person is popping out in the page. You can see them, whereas they may have blended a little bit more with like the greens and the natural colors. Oops. Okay, another artist using the body, but in a really cool, interesting way. This is Doreen Gardner, and Doreen Gardner, she uses a lot of, she makes a lot of these meat-like pieces or body-like pieces using silicone or like dragon skin, so stuff you'd buy at like Smooth On. But then what's interesting is the way like the inside parts, where you'd see like the interior of the bodies are made. They're usually made with like fabrics or like jewels. So it's something like really unexpected, but it's really kind of unsettling at first because everything looks like, raw meat to an extent. But then when you take a closer look, everything's like bejeweled and ornamented. Gustav Klimt was also another one. I thought, this is more of like a classic example, but I thought a lot about Rory and her work with this one just because of the way she would use ornamentation and a lot of this just kind of atmospheric type color that would happen. So I thought that was a good reference for her. Another really cool figurative reference, another person that worked on the Obama portraits, but this artist did Michelle Obama's portrait. This is Amy Sherald, and she does a lot of portraits of African American folks, and what she does is she makes them all like a gray tone because she feels like they're kind of not being quite represented in the world. So that's why everything's kind of this muted gray skin color. I think her paintings are just really beautiful and well done. Kara Walker, a lot of you seem to be really interested in creating like these complex narratives with your work, or creating imagery that can be really kind of clever and complicated. And I think Kara Walker does a really good job of doing that. A lot of her pieces take a little while just to kind of investigate to see what all's going on with the narrative. So I thought this would be a really interesting one for you all to see, because there is a lot going on here with this image. David Algemed, he does some really great work with abstracting the figure. And what's happening with these pieces is he takes a lot of different mixed media, different parts to create these busts, but then, he kind of makes them feel kind of like strange, uncanny, or dreamlike. His Art 21 video is really great. I'm definitely recommending we watch it as a class at some point. And then here's another one up close. This artist, I know I had somebody come up to me and ask about doing cut paper work, and this is Despina Zagrafos. She's from Greece originally, but she lives in New York City. I met her recently because we were in an art exhibit together, and I fell in love with her really complicated paperworks. So I just wanted to show an example of that as a good reference. So she's got an Instagram. Any of these artists that you see, minus the art history folks, will probably have a pretty good chance of finding them on Instagram, which I highly recommend doing and following them, because that way when you're going through your feed or scrolling, you can find some really interesting, cool art pieces, and they may inspire you to make other works. We had a couple people that were interested in text, so I thought it was important to show Barbara Kruger, and you may have seen her in your art history classes. Her work is really confrontational and kind of aggressive with her color use and her imagery, and that's the point behind the work is she wants it to be really um, punchy. So she has a graphic design background, and a lot of her work kind of went into the fine art world. Another artist using text, but using text with neon, is Bruce Nauman. And he does a lot of these like really interesting pieces using text in multiple ways. So, in the piece on the left, he's like layering text. And in the piece on the right, he's using different different combos of words just to kind of make you sit and question your relationship with the world and the body. So I thought he would be a really great example to show. And for more of our portraiture fans, I have Alice Neal, who's a really phenomenal painter. Um, her works aren't like perfect as far as like proportion wise, but they create this the way she paints, like they creates these like really compelling, interesting relationships that feel like very confrontational. So she has a really specific aesthetic with the way she works. And then Tom Sachs, a lot of you seem to be interested in pop culture and just kind of what's happening out in the world. And I thought he was a really cool example if you didn't know about him, because he takes a lot of standard imagery from corporations like McDonald's. He's done stuff with like NASA, and created these different types of art pieces. So this um, emergency stand for that's all sponsored by McDonald's. So it's almost like this post-apocalyptic McDonald's scene that he's created. Piece on the right is a crying Hello Kitty. And he does take a lot of these pop culture references and create these kind of crazy interesting things. So here's another McDonald's sponsored piece. It's a nativity scene with the Simpsons as the three wise men, and then the angel and the other figures are all Hello Kitties. And then he's also done things with Nike, so I think this one's pretty funny, where he made the graphic design poster that says boring instead of Nike, because you're used to Nike being something really action packed and kind of and it's more sports related. Anyway, I thought these artists were all really great references. If you all have any questions for me or want to discuss anything with your upcoming proposals, please let me know. Looking forward to seeing what you come up with.